Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Aligned. Erin here, and today I'm excited to introduce you all to Nicole Dragus, who connected with me back in, I want to say 2022. And we ended up doing a human design reading and have just been following along on each other's journeys ever since. And Nicole is a 1-3 sacral generator. And this woman is such an inspiring creative. I swear everything she puts her hands on ends up being so beautiful and so authentic. So I invited her onto the podcast because I wanted her to share a little bit about her creative process and how she connects to her sacral and to her passion and how she prioritizes her joy and how that kind of translates into her life. But we ended up talking about so much more. What I loved is that Nicole had some incredible questions for me, and we really just connected on like what it means to be in transition and to be in that waiting period and that moment of pause where we're working towards something, but we're not yet seeing sort of like the material or the physical change or acceleration, or like production of something. And yeah, this conversation was really just a breath of fresh air. I think it will resonate with anyone who is on the path of finding themselves, figuring out what it means to be on purpose or to have a purpose or to be searching for purpose, and how to actually navigate that messy middle, that uncomfortable in between. Nicole is working on a really inspiring and exciting new project called Lektura, which is a magazine of sorts that's going to focus on sort of philosophical principles as well as like the lived embodiment of those practices and principles. So I highly recommend you all connect with Nicole after listening to this episode. And yeah, enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you on the other side. How are you?
Good. I actually just realized now it's been so long since we've spoken.
Well, thank you for being here. And I'm so excited to introduce you to our audience and everyone who is listening. And it's always so funny how, like, I don't plan my podcast recordings. I don't like sit down and think, who am I going to invite onto the podcast? Like, it is always so serendipitous. And literally just the other night, I had a dream about someone who, like, I don't really know all that well, and woke up and I was like, oh, I have to invite him onto the podcast. So I sent him a voice note on Instagram and I was like, this is a weird thing to say, but I'm going to go for it. And I feel like it was kind of similar with you, and just a little bit of like, I guess, backstory. You and I connected on social media, on the interwebs,
Right.
years ago. I don't even know how, and ended up doing a human design reading together. And I really do, like, I keep tabs on everyone that I work with. And I have a fourth line profile in human design. So much of my experience is just like a interaction of me and my network and like the people around me. And I love watching like the evolution of friends, family, and I consider everyone that I work with to be like a close friend of mine, whether or not we stay in touch. And you're a generator. So for everyone who's listening, Nicole is a 1-3 generator. And you represent, like, to me, you are such a like creative powerhouse. And I have watched you like evolve and watched how your creative process has evolved, and how you, no matter what phase or transition you're going through, like there's never a pause in creating. And I think that is so important for all sacral beings, whatever your modality is. But I just think you always have such a beautiful way of expressing yourself and expressing your creativity. So thank you for sharing that and kind of being a beacon of what that means. But I would love to just kind of first give a little bit of background about like who you are and where you come from.
First of all, thank you. That was such a beautiful introduction already. And I think what really touched me the most about you recently when we got in touch again was that you remembered parts of my journey, and we had spoken only once, and it was like you said, we met, I think algorithms, Instagram showed me something of yours, and then I connected with you and you did a human design reading for me. But that was years ago. And I recently wrote to you and you remembered and said, "Oh, yeah, like, how are you? I've seen this." And it was so impactful and touching to me that someone, like a stranger basically, but someone that I connected with once could and would remember somehow my story. So, who am I has been the main I guess, thing that I've been working on defining more and more, because I find that I'm a very multifaceted person living in a world that wants to put you in certain boxes. And I think that's been the hardest part of my journey, is trying to find a box that I belong in when I know that the whole of my being just wants to be free. If there was a box that said free, that would be where I would put me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think in this whole process, the one thing that I've really been trying to do is I've just been trying to intentionally build my life. So I don't see myself as someone who's building a career or someone who's building necessarily some identity, but just somebody that's building my life and trying to choose all of the different facets of my life. So from who I am to what I do to the meaning that I give my life, it's just very intentional for me. And I think that's why I keep showing up in these very different ways. And I'm trying right now to kind of give it more direction, because I've come to some realizations which I'm hoping to maybe share with you or just share in general.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think that's exactly why you're here. And it is to share exactly that. And it's funny what you mentioned about being kind of so multifaceted and, um, looking at your chart. So the way Nicole's mechanics function is she has something that's called triple split definition. So, our definition in human design is like the consistent parts of our energy, the parts of us that are fixed and reliable and consistent and turned on all the time. And you have a lot of definition outside of just your sacral. But it's almost as if you have these like three separate islands. So it's definition, it's like energy that imagine like a circuit board, and so those islands speak to each other, but there's kind of a break or a separation between the different parts. And so what that means is that sometimes the energy isn't always moving fluidly between all of these fixed parts of you, and that can lead to this sort of like separation or scatteredness or multifaceted, multi-passionate energy that you have. And so being able to understand that there's also nothing wrong with that, and knowing and trusting the process and learning how to work with that is often what's so important. But before we kind of dive into some of like your big realizations and everything of that nature, I would love to know, like, because you're young still, right? How old are you?
26,
26. And so, like I said, we connected when you were in your early
22, I
20s.
think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like you have always, or very early on already, kind of made decisions to follow your own path in a way, or let your creativity lead, which is anyone who's dabbled even just a little bit in human design understands the value in, especially for generators and manifesting generators, how important it is to follow your passion and follow your creativity, and that it's not about the output, it's actually about the creative process. And how did you know, and like when did you kind of know that you wanted a different life for yourself than perhaps the status quo and what maybe we were conditioned within our societies to desire?
I think second year of university, I can actually pinpoint that moment is when I knew that this, how do I say, these structures that are prescribed for us are not somehow fulfilling my life. So I think where some people's journey takes them on different paths with structure, for me it was really around school, because I would say that, you know, the school system sets us up for what will then be the perfect employee and then the perfect individual in society, and the things we should do or we shouldn't do. And I was very straight A, school oriented student. I was highly structured. I structured every second, every minute of my time. I remember having structure for pauses, for breaks, for a bit of, I would say, control oriented freak, whatever you want to call it. And I, at some point in life, you know, relationships with people and things like that, it came in the way and it took control for me. So that's when I realized all of these structures, the prescribed structures that are set for us to have a safe and comfortable life, will never be able to help us deal with change. And there was something then inside of me internally that took me on this journey of realizing that actually my life's been a product of a lot of change, because I moved when I was very young, at the age of 5. I spent my summers going between Romania, where I was born, and living in Canada, which were two very different societies. And I had to kind of witness these very different parts of myself, culturally speaking, and always try to figure out, well, how do I navigate these two sides of who I am? So there was so much change around me somehow, and I tried to find and limit myself within a structure, but it wasn't actually helping me. And I think that's the point when I decided that we're sort of prescribed in these limited boxes and it doesn't work, and I need to find my own way to get through life, because only that would actually bring true fulfillment to me. And also, there was something inside of me that said, if somebody created these systems, that means that I could create my own. And if I could just recognize the patterns of how to do that, that eventually I'd be able to create my own and maybe be a vehicle for change, because I saw it was wrong, but I didn't want to stop there. I didn't want to say, okay, it's wrong. Society sucks. That wasn't my ideal. It was, how do I find solutions that I could then give to people or give to myself, and maybe help other people in that process.
I love what you shared about structure, and I can relate so deeply to that. Having also been like the most structured and like strategic, and becoming a product of kind of that environment. And what's interesting is you and I have something that's very unique in our design, and we both have what's called being a quad right. So when you look at a human design chart, there's 4 arrows at the top, and that's really pertaining to like the very, very deeper layers of like our mind, our personality, and our unconscious vehicle, and the way that our brains and our bodies work. And everything right is kind of keynoting toward receptivity, openness, taking in versus like putting out. And we live in a world, and the very beginning of like the Homo sapiens species was all a very left dominated species. That was like the onset of our kind. And we're in this huge transition period now where we're starting to move toward the right. So you and I are more a product of like this future state and future reality of our species, but we live in a structured, strategic world. And because we are very different from that, we are the most susceptible to conditioning and taking on that, right? Because oftentimes we try to be what we're not, because we're not shown in the world around us that being the way that we are is okay, and that it is safe, and that we can achieve the things that we desire. So we change ourselves to fit into that box. And I know for myself, at least, also being a projector and having just a lot of like sensitivity in my chart, being that structured and being in such a structured environment was aging me, was like killing me from the inside out. And I had to learn, and I'm still learning, like how to let go of the need for that control and that structure, and understanding that there is a new way of doing things. And it's by creating my own set of rules for like what works for me.
Right. That's very interesting. Can I ask you a question about that process and how it's been
Yeah.
for you to find your own set of rules? Because I do think structure has its place in creativity, and that's been my more recent realization. It's not just about I don't find that it's helpful if you're just going with what feels right in every single moment, because you might have feelings towards very many different parts and you want to be very many different things, and then you can never actually bring something to life. So I was curious about your set of kind of rules and how you discovered them for yourself.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit of a balance where we also have to acknowledge like we are living in a strategic world.
Right.
And where's that balance? It's not about just saying like I'm going to be loosey goosey all the time and just go with the flow entirely, because you're right, that can actually stifle the creative process. It's the same with, I think of children, and I'm not a mother myself, but I do know that there is kind of like an inherent need for children to have some kind of structure and boundaries around their play and their creativity. It's so important that we make space for children to play freely, to like explore creatively, and to not restrict them in that process, but put a boundary around them for safety, right? It's the same as if you imagine having a bunch of animals, and you need to have those animals, like you want them to roam free. You want your chickens to be pasture raised and your cows and everything, but have a structure so that they don't roam into, the traffic that is going to be dangerous and potentially fatal for them. So for me, it's really looked like, I think first step one for me was like a process of completely like purging and letting go. And that was, I've shared a lot about this on the podcast in different conversations, but my process of like quitting my corporate life and traveling and allowing myself like a fixed period of time to basically challenge everything that I knew about myself and who I was and the identities that I had adopted. And I think travel is so valuable for that. And in some ways, there's structure around that because you can have like a fixed period of time to explore in that way. And once I let go of the need for structure and for control, then it was about how do I bring something back in that again creates that foundation or that boundary for me, but then allows me freedom to play within that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, of
And the way
course.
I see this most necessary for me, it's not really for like my day-to-day life, but it's a lot for my business often. And I guess when you're an entrepreneur and you're kind of creating your own thing, there's no separation between business and life, and that's what I think can be really hard. And so I have to have strict boundaries and structure around how I use my phone, and what I consider to be like productive working time, and making sure that I carve out space to like sit uninterrupted and write, for example. And even sometimes it's like if I don't feel the creative urge, still sitting there and like being in the space of like, well, I'm not going to give up and just go and find something else to do, but I'm going to honor this moment and like sit here. And even if I don't produce what I thought that I wanted to produce, I'm still kind of acknowledging or signaling energetically and subconsciously to my body that like this is valuable to me, and that I will always have space created for this creativity to come through when it's ready.
That's wonderful. I think that makes a lot of sense because you define the fact that business being somehow in and of itself structured is okay. There's like an area of it that you can define that structure, and then there's the part of you that can remain sort of free to, do things with. I also find, I don't know about you and your business, but I also find that there's always a set of tasks to get done, and trying to use my energy to do them as opposed to forcing them into a schedule really helps me. I don't know if there's something in my human design chart about that. I think it has something to do with my sacral. And that's something you told me way back ago. And I think that's been a huge like a decision making factor that whenever I ignored it went very wrong. And whenever I followed it, it was usually very good.
Yeah, exactly. It's using your energy and using your sacral response. And I think, like you said, like have your tasks and be organized in that, but
Yeah.
then let your energy decide and respond in the moment toward what you have the capacity for. And this is what I always share with generators. Like, because we have all these labels of this is your strategy, this is your authority. And if you look at them in isolation, you can intellectualize them and say, okay, I understand this. But if you don't understand like the why behind it, it can be hard sometimes to implement. And the whole concept of like the sacral response and the strategy of like waiting to respond is recognizing that like your sacral in the moment is able to confirm to you whether or not you have the energy to see that task through. So if you're bypassing the response and committing to something because your mind is telling you, no, but I have to, I should, whatever the narrative might be, you're going to start it and then you're going to experience some kind of resistance, some kind of frustration. You might not finish it. And then you're going to get into these like negative loops of, oh, I never finish what I start, or why can't I see things through? And it's not that you have a like a capacity problem or a follow through problem. It's that you haven't been giving your like natural mechanics an opportunity to tell you when or when not you have the energy and the resources for that thing.
And do you think you can apply that also to the, say, when you don't know what it is, say you're searching for your purpose, um, and maybe then it's not, I find with, at least with my sacral authority, that if it's a task, if it's something that can be done in this moment, then, maybe within a few minutes, maybe even seconds, it depends on my awareness to myself, I'll find out if I should do that thing or not. But when it's something greater, like your life's purpose, do you find, or I guess from your experience of human design, is there a certain, I don't know, period of time that you need to give yourself freedom until you respond as a generator? Freedom, space, whatever you want to call it.
Well, that's the fun part. That period of time is going to be different for everybody. And I think it depends on how deeply you're able to surrender to your creative process, and your purpose finds you. The path finds you. And I recently wrote a Substack just the other day about how it's not about finding your purpose, it's about just being on purpose at all times. And what does that mean? In your case, it means being connected to your creative center and to your passions and into like whatever it is that lights you up in the moment, and being devoted to that process as well. Because I think some people get this wrong where they think that it's okay, I just get to do whatever feels good. And there's a difference between chasing what feels good, like a dopamine hit, and honoring and revering and having devotion to the creative process, because sometimes that requires discipline. And sometimes that requires like doing something that isn't initially incredibly fun. But if on the other side of completing that, you feel that deep sense of satisfaction, you've used up your sacral energy, you've extended it in a way that brings you satisfaction, you're on purpose. And you're going like you are on the right path towards where you need to be. And the
I love
end of
that.
the path doesn't matter as much as like making sure you're on the path.
I love that when I read it. It was such a different perspective shift. And speaking on this idea of following your passions is something I had a realization over, and I'd love your take because I often also, heard this idea of, you should follow what you're passionate about, but I more recently realized that it's somehow related to also what you're naturally good at, because I think each of us have certain strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes our passions, like, for example, I might be passionate about singing, but naturally I don't have the ability to sing, which is something that you can obviously learn if you'd like to. But then there are certain things that I might be naturally good at. And I find that those things light you up naturally somehow, and they come to you, like you said. And I wanted to see if there was, I don't know, in your journey, if you found some clarity between these things of your passion versus what you're good at, and if they're always connected or if at times they're not necessarily connected, and that maybe it's better to follow what you're good at because it'll actually, how do I say, bring you more fulfillment, bring you closer to what it is that you really should be doing in life versus, and
Yeah.
I think that's where the human design narratives that they can construct and help you construct help you to really figure
Yeah.
out what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, cuz that is it's a great question. And like I said, I think this is where there's a lot of nuance and specificity depending on like the deeper layers of your design, but on one end you can even just look at your profile and that can already give you clarity on how to approach passion and how you use your energy and things like that because it's the storyline of your life. So for someone who might have a second line in their profile, like I do, for example, I'm a 2-4, but for anyone who might be a 2-5 or a 6-2, there's a couple different combinations. The 2 is like the natural. These are people who like there are certain gifts that they were born with, imparted, whether they're again like physical things, whether it is information systems, whether it is art, like there's things that they just get. It just clicks. And for them, the best course of action is to just continue to pour into the things that they're naturally good at because they're not really the one who has to go around and like fuck around and find out and try all the different things. Whereas for people who might have a third line in their profile, like you're a 1-3,
I
but
was
this could
actually about to
also
ask.
be 3-6s, 3-5s, anyone with a 3. And also keep in mind, it doesn't just relate to your profile. We all have some kind of combination or element of all of these things. So that's what I love about human design is it's not restrictive within these sort of like frameworks, but anyone who has a third line, especially in their profile, there is going to be an inherent need to just fuck around and find out, to try to not be afraid of making mistakes because oftentimes it's through doing the thing and realizing that, oh, maybe this isn't right for me. It takes them to the next like realization or the next step or the next kind of passion or project that they want to work on. And it's only through kind of bumping around and fumbling that you actually get your way there.
Right.
So it's so important for third lines to resist the kind of like pessimism train that wants to come in from the not self mind that's like, oh, why do things never work out for me? Why do things have to be hard? Because it's not hard. It's fun. It's
Yeah.
adventurous.
I
It
mean,
can be exhilarating.
it's a really good perspective shift because it can be, and it can also get to a point where it's exhausting, right? And you need a bit of a pause to say, "Whoa, what's going on? Is it that I can't commit, or what is?" And I love this explanation with human design, and I love systems that can also help bring some clarity because it does help, right? With me and my creativity, I tried so many different things from back in 2020, I was writing a book about our emotions, and then I was posting in a certain way about that was very different than kind of how I show up now. Then I opened up a bookshop last year. I was doing marketing. I worked with so many different types of people, not really finding like a specific niche. And these, especially last year when I opened up the bookshop, and then out of a whole slew of reasons, wasn't able to continue it, it felt like a huge failure because I had tried already so many things and I had gotten to a point where I thought, well, this was my thing. This was the thing that I was supposed to be doing because I've always loved writing and I've always loved reading and wanting to share that with people. What I found out though through opening it is it wasn't in that format, not yet, that there is something else because there are also areas of my life like flexibility and being in the right environment when I open up such a space, or if a space was even meant for me or not, that were not really defined. However, especially when you do these things publicly and when you do them, everybody's witnessing your creative trial and errors, it can definitely feel like a failure at times, or it can be difficult to move on from those experiments, especially because I don't think society prioritizes experimenting. So,
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's like everything is so focused on the outcome
mhm.
instead of the process. Whereas, like, you should be able to look back and be like, damn, look at the things I've done. You've gone where most people would never consider going. How many people have the dream of opening something up and never actually take the action because they're so kind of boggled down by the what ifs and the fear and the hesitation and again the fear of not being successful. You did it. That's ballsy. And like I said, it's not about the outcome. Your worth isn't tied to having success in the bookshop, right? And it's about understanding that, like, that was part of the path. You were on the path, and
Hmm.
it's given you so much experience. And that's the magic of being a third line, is like that experience that you get through the trial and error is wisdom. And that's what people will more and more and more see in you, is like, damn, not only does she know stuff, she's lived it. And I
Right.
trust her even more because of that. And I
And
want to
some
see what's next.
Exactly, and part of me needs that. I actually have always said that I couldn't stand behind words if I had not somehow experienced them myself. So I don't know, again, if there was something in my try because I have dabbled with human design through you, and then
Mhm.
actually last year as well. I think there was something to do with the martyr
Yeah,
in my
that's the third.
chart.
That's the third line.
Is
That's
that
the
the
name of what
third
it
line?
means to be a third line.
Okay,
Mhm.
right, and so there it is. That's true for
Yeah.
me. It's always been. I can't just say something or I can't
Mhm.
hold a belief that I haven't, experimented with, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's so important now, especially in the age of AI, because as a writer, I'm sure that you have seen this and that it has rubbed you in some sort of way. But we're getting more and more creators who are writing and sharing ideas. And you can tell very easily whether or not those words come from the human or come from the machine. And I think at first, a lot of writers got really, really bitter and sort of cynical about a lot of this, because it's like, well, okay, fuck this. I don't want to participate in this like sea of information anymore, because like, how am I going to stand out against all of this noise? Whereas I think as we're evolving, we have that, like, again, we have a ability, a sensitivity to authenticity. And I think what comes through in, for example, like your words and what you share is the lived experience behind it. And I know for a fact, like, I just don't buy shit. Like, even if it's like a compelling story or narrative, if I know that it doesn't come from true, authentic, lived experience in some capacity.
Well, I think that's a really nice transition with writing, and writing is one of those forms that's been around forever. Like since our beginnings, it was one of the forms of communication that we used very early on. And so I think that it holds something that has to relate to lived experience. It has to be because you've experienced certain emotion states, phases, life, and you found words to try to basically define something that's not really defined. This is where writing becomes, I think, really timeless, and why, in general, with artists, not just with writing, but there are artists and writers who are timeless, whose ideas, if we read them in the 19th century, were applicable. If we read them today, they're applicable. And that makes me ask a question of why, because at the end of the day, they've gone through the same human experience. Even though I'm a history major, so I love looking at history across time, people, culture, patterns, how we've changed, how we've evolved, if we've changed and evolved. To some extent, we have. Obviously, we have technological advancements like AI, like technology, and everything else that's coming now in our time period. But this also happened during the Industrial Revolution. So this isn't the core of what's happening today, isn't something that's actually that new. And if we look at how people dealt with it then and some of the emotions they were going through then, we could try to make sense of what we're going through now. Writers kind of capture that into a story, into something that's tangible. And I've been trying to transition more into reading fiction, because I think fiction does something that nonfiction can't do, which it goes into those deeper layers and it doesn't force meaning onto us. So we can extract our own meaning from those characters and from their experiences based off of what we're going through today, as opposed to nonfiction, which kind of breaks that down and says, okay, this is what your takeaway should be.
I completely agree. It preserves the creative and like the imagination. It preserves our imagination. And I've done the exact same thing. I think I've been reading fiction for the last few years now more than anything else. I dropped the self-development and the personal development books and everything because I got what I needed from them and from that time. And I don't need someone to tell me what's good for me anymore because I know how to find that for myself. And that's what, more than anything else, I think the human design system gives to us, is a way to trust our own authority and trust that like we have the keys to understand what is or is not right for us. um but yeah, I love what you shared there.
Thank you. But again, also with originality, because I think also the reason why I dropped a lot of self help was because it wasn't really feeling original anymore. It feels like everybody's copying each other's narrative, that there is already a prescribed narrative and a solution, and that these are the things. I don't know if it's the things that sell or if it's the things that want to be sold, but regardless, it's lost a lot of that, I guess, individual lived experience. And I think that's something that AI is not going to be able to replicate at all. And I don't think that that will satisfy that depth that we have as humans. And we all have it. I think there's a bit of a, from my perspective, there's a bit of wanting for us to stop having it, to try to go through life more and more detached, disconnected. I see also when I'm going on the train here, people are going to work, there's this just no expression, no, they're devoid of meaning, they're not connected to their environments. This is really sad. But I think there's also a shift in the other direction of people that feel that and that want that to come back, because there's an emptiness that we need to kind of address
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, there's going to be this great split, and it's going to be the, again, people who fall victim to the transition and the change, and there's going to be the people that take it and are empowered by it and take action against it. And human design, as well as so many other different like systems and frameworks of understanding the human transition, whether it's astrology or anything. 2027 is marking this like massive
Yeah, I've heard of
shift
that.
away from the way of doing things into this new individual, authentic, empowered future. And so, like I said, there's going to be a split, and there's going to be people that just they stay stuck. They're going to be the ones who end up attached to the like virtual reality headsets and things, and that's all that will be their lives.
Do you
And then
think
there'll
there
be a
are,
group of us who don't.
right? Do you think there are certain um, sets of combinations of human design that make you more prescribed for that, or is it actually not being connected to your human design that causes you to fall, like you said, for example, with us, that maybe we were more predisposed to certain cultural conditionings because of a certain line in our charts?
Yeah. That's what's interesting is like, yes, there's definitely like the more openness you have, the more sensitivity that you might have to your environment, but that's also part of it. It's like there's nature and there's nurture. So on one end, like your nature, your definition, the parts of you that are fixed, that's determining like who you are, your identity, how you move around in the world. But the expression of that definition is entirely dependent on the environment that you're placed in,
Mm, okay.
because you can have tons of sensitivity, but if you're placed into a family and an environment that really nurtures your uniqueness and allowing you the creativity and the openness to follow your own path, and you have a really like healthy upbringing, that sensitivity is going to be a superpower. And at the same time, you can have someone who has a ton of definition, which kind of gives them a bit of a barrier to outside influence. But if you put them into an incredibly broken environment and a very toxic environment, like they're going to struggle to fully express. So it's entirely dependent, really, I think, on environment and how well they're able to navigate the conditioning field.
And can they use their human design to do that?
Totally. Well, I think that's the whole purpose of having this information and this knowledge, is to self-empower and to provide tools to get unstuck and to decondition.
It's
Because
super
conditioning is not a bad thing. There's nothing we can do about it. It colors
right.
the human experience, and it's just a matter of like, do we get stuck in it and do we attach to it? Or do we use it as information, but know how to stay connected to our intuition and to ourselves?
It's super interesting because I keep following this idea that you should write your own story. And that means coming up with the character of your life and actually somehow defining your life as if you were writing a story. And I was now wondering about, you know, like all these systems like human design, astrology, and others, how you can use them because essentially that's what they're doing. They do create an archetype for you. They create
A
somehow it gives
character.
you a character, yeah, exactly, of who you can become or what you
Yeah.
can do. So I now kind of realize that even for myself of ways that you can do that to, yeah, develop your character starting with human design, but then still kind of having to write your own story through your life in terms of what you do and how you live your life. Do you have
Yeah.
people that come to you for that in terms of just finding definition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what most people are searching for is like meaning and answers and direction. And most people coming to this recognition, they've had some sort of awakening to recognize like the life that I'm in now is not the life I desire for myself and my character and what I know might be possible, but I have no idea how to get out of it and how to get where I want to go and where I want to take that story. And so being able to anchor into like grounded practical tools that it's not just like again a personality system that's saying like this is your archetype, that's it, which sometimes that was a limitation I felt often with astrology was like what do I do with it? I love astrology because it can color more so like the cycles that you're in. I like using it more for like understanding about like what chapter am I in? What influences am I going through during these periods? But no matter what, like I know how to move because I understand the mechanics of like my vehicle and my body in that way.
That's super nice. No, I found it very helpful as well. And whenever I got into the framework of human design, um, it helped me for a period of time, but then I definitely also struggle with understanding because I don't understand the full range of all the different lines and how they
Mhm.
interact with each other. And so, of course, then you fall into certain characterizations in your head and you say, well, because I'm a generator, that means I'm just this one thing. And
Mhm.
then once again, there's that thing inside of me that says, but you're not. And how do you use that one thing to make it easier for you to do life as opposed to limiting yourself in that one category? Although I do think it's important somehow to define who and what you want to be specifically in your creativity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So for you, like, what do you do to feel connected to your creativity on a daily basis? Are there certain things that you do to kind of like stay connected, to stay on purpose, to feel your best?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it was making a choice that I want to live a creative life and not wanting to settle for anything less. So, despite the fact that sometimes that means I don't have a lack of stability, that I have to create my own routine, for example, or workflow or pattern, and that sometimes there's fluctuations in what I'm doing, I still would prefer that over somebody else prescribing my life for me in maybe a different setting. Although I have respect for that as well, and I've come to respect it. And I think for me, what I do to feel good is, again, make that choice consciously every day because that helps me to push through the times when it's not so good or times when it feels like I am not getting further ahead in whatever project it is that I'm working on. But I think I have a set of buckets, I call them in my head, of activities that I really need and enjoy and that I keep coming back to. And I just recognize them over time. So I always come back to writing. Usually I journal, but I don't have a format for that. It's just basically picking up the pen and writing whatever comes into my head and how I've had conversations, I think, with the divine through writing as well. I find I get a lot of answers by asking them on paper and then allowing my pen to kind of give me that answer, which has been really beautiful. And recently in my writing process, I've decided to write every day, to journal every day, which is not something I wanted to make a routine of. But what I found was that when I wasn't doing it daily, I was only doing it when things were hard. So I was coming to it as an outlet for pain or sadness, but then I was not reflecting enough on the good things that were happening each day. And then I didn't really like doing it as a gratitude practice because that felt forced somehow as well. Because then you're saying, okay, I'm sitting down with my journal and let me think of 5 things that I'm grateful for in this moment. But maybe in that moment, when you're actually grateful for those things, you're not going to your journal to write them down because you're so in the moment of the experience. So there's that fence, like you said, around the animals that are grazing the field. That was my fence of, okay, you're going to write daily. Doesn't matter how much, doesn't matter how little, but you're just going to write something so that you can keep account of the nuances of your life. So that always helps me to feel good. And I think the rest of that has been just, yeah, I have a project right now that I'm working on, and I've been allowing it to talk to me every day and tell me what the next phase of it will be. And I'm finding a lot of um, satisfaction in the process of creating it. But now I've consciously made a little book for what that process is. So I never recorded my process before. I didn't keep track of the process. And I think then I get to these moments where if it doesn't, succeed, like the way the bookshop, for example, didn't succeed, let's say, I ignore the whole process of what happened and how I got there and what I learned along the way. So now I just keep a little journal as well of what I'm doing, how I feel about it while I'm doing it. It's a little bit unnatural because you have to take a step back and constantly observe yourself. Maybe throughout the day, you check in and say, okay, what did I do today and how did I feel about it? And what is the framework for what I'm building? Because I don't want to risk essentially missing out on this phase. I don't want it, in 3 years or something from now, to look back and say, well, it just came naturally. I don't know what I did. I don't know how I got here. A spark of luck, because there are those, right? There are those moments that basically propel everything forward and make everything go fast. There's those moments of nothingness. That's what it feels like. Nothing. It feels like silence, ghost, nothing's happening. And then there's these moments that are huge shifts that radically change the direction, that make everything you've been working on in the last, I don't know, years come together. And it seems like everything that happened before that was not that much, actually, because that one moment made it happen so quickly that you missed the process. So I don't want to miss the process. Right now, I'm finding a lot of joy in writing and recording the process, knowing that this moment will come and trusting that this moment will come. But it's been in a bit of an uncomfortable period because I've had to kind of take a step back and not rush into the next thing and let it come to me. And it comes to me in little phases each day. And each day I have a little bit more clarity. But I'm in a transition phase, and transition phases are awkward to define. And I'm sort of having to focus more on these daily process slash exactly being intentional, waking up, finding gratitude from getting up, having a certain routine that's healthy for my mind, my body, my spirit. I'm not just focusing on my business or what I'm working on or what I'm writing on, but just overall, is my life aligning with who I want to be? So that's what I find joy in right now. It's been interesting.
I love that. And I appreciate your openness around that phase. And I think there will be so many people listening who can resonate so deeply with what you shared, because I think no matter what your design is, no matter what your energy type is, there is always a process of like waiting at
Yeah.
some point in time, whether it's waiting for the creativity to come through, waiting for the intuitive hit, waiting for the emotional wave to like ride its course. And I think that is just an inherent human lesson, is how to be still and how to be patient until it's time. And we can't escape that. We can't run from it. We cannot accelerate it. And the more comfortable we can get with understanding how to navigate the transitions, the more fruitful and fulfilling not only will our lives be, but will those surges be when they do come.
Well, and so I've heard this principle, but honestly, this is when I'm applying it now because it's the first time that I've actually stopped. So I didn't rush into something else. I always had, let's say, a backup to my projects. I always had a plan B, C, whatever. But this is the first time that out of a series of events, all my plans crashed. And I said, okay, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to wait and I'm going to observe and I'm going to take some time to recognize what's working and assessing it and what's not working and what's natural to me and what's not natural to me and what fulfills me, what value I can bring. And it's very awkward because these phases, as much as we talk about them, they're not necessarily appreciated because how they look from the outside, it looks like, well, where are the results? What's the next phase? What's going on? How it is from the inside is a process of daily things where you feel yourself moving forward, but not in a way that's necessarily yet quantifiable. And that's very frustrating. So you have this internal battle of, do I run back into something that's safe or just run into something, period? Or do I keep saying and trusting? And I'm in that phase of I need to trust. Like I don't feel I have another option but to trust right now. But it's I do want to share it because I don't know how to explain how awkward and uncomfortable it can feel and to show up and to talk to people who ask, well, what are you doing right now? And you don't have a clear answer. Although you do inside of you, but you don't have that clear, I'm doing A. It's very strange. It's not, I want to say it's very strange because I think sometimes it's glamorized, especially after you're out of this process. You say, I waited for a while and something happened after.
Yeah.
When you're in
Yeah.
it, it's not so easy. It's
Yeah.
strange.
That's so funny you say that because I went through a long period and I guess I'm still somewhat in it because when I left Bali, which was the last place that I was like living more
Right.
fixed, which was over 2 years ago
I
now,
wanted to ask you about actually as
like
well.
I have just, and what I started saying to people, because what I noticed through conversation was people, especially here, like in the US, people's first question always is like, what are you doing? Where are you living? And there was like at first that moment of like, oh my God, it's awkward. But then I started realizing, I was like, it's not that I'm not uncomfortable with this. They're uncomfortable with this. And I started just kind of like acknowledging that and anchoring into, and what I would say to people is like, I'm in transition. Just that I'm in transition. I was there and now I'm here, but it's not like permanent and I'm in transition. And watching kind of watching them move through the discomfort was a very like interesting process, but I got comfortable within that period very quickly. And I think sometimes that's, again, it's not about just like enduring the discomfort until you're out of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
learning how to be comfortable in the discomfort, and
Right.
then you'll be able to get out of it quicker.
That's really nice. I actually didn't, maybe because if you're sensitive and I'm sensitive, you pick it up as if it's your own discomfort. But if I actually do sit with myself in a room, I'm completely comfortable with the phase that I'm in. I actually think it's necessary for me. I actually think that you're right in terms of the fact that I'm picking up somebody else's discomfort and
Mhm.
wanting to mitigate for it, wanting it to be better for them somehow, to give them an answer. But that's really good because you don't have to do anything about it. And I think I would rather show up as exactly who I am right now, as opposed to coming up with some answer of I'm doing this or I'm doing that or whatever elaborate thing. That's true. Yeah,
Because
transition.
that's inauthentic. The
Right.
moment we
Yeah.
start to try to justify or please or give the answers that we think someone wants to hear, we are not being authentic. And our purpose, beyond like everybody's purpose, if you really want to distill anything down, it's to be authentic. And
Right.
the more authentic we are, the more on purpose we are. So every conversation that we have, everything that we should do, that we do, we just want it to be authentic and to come from an authentic place.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it looks like right now. So I love that. And I guess for you, are you in where are you? I'm asking you now, have you decided on the place you want to be in? Are you still in
I'm
transition
still
looking for it?
waiting, like I'm waiting to be shown what's next. And it's interesting because I was spending a lot of time in Puerto Rico where my brother lives, and I have a really amazing community out there. And for the people, I was like, okay, I will stay here until next steps arrive. But that environment was really not serving me.
Mhm.
And um, then I started dating someone who lives in Switzerland. And so I spent 3 months there this autumn. And now I'm making decisions as like a pair, which is something I've never done before, where it's like, it's not just me on my own anymore. I have a partner beside me. And on some ways, that also like alleviates a little bit of like the pressure of like what's next. But I don't have the answers because I don't necessarily see myself living full time in Switzerland, but I don't quite know where I would want to be next. And something that practicing human design over the last 8 years has really helped me is just like working the trust muscle of just surrender and like make the most of where you are. And for this chapter of transition, it looks like moving around a lot and being really nomadic and spending a couple months here, a couple months here. I'm going to Indonesia for the first time in 2 years in February, which I'm really excited about. And then I'll be in Portugal in April for my retreat. So it's moving and I don't know where it's going to take me, but like I've learned to love that also like the unknown of that because in not knowing, it also means that everything is possible.
That's right. Yeah, but this is a breath of fresh air because I'm in a similar situation and there aren't so many people that are in a similar situation and you're not navigating, I think, the traditional structure of life because somewhere you decided you didn't want that. So you don't have like similar to you, my partner's from Germany. So we are literally living between Canada, Romania, and Germany, and we're doing it together now because we decided that's what we wanted. So now you've got another person involved in that process. You've got another country to factor into your moving around throughout the year. Everybody, so you can't just choose. Okay, I'm going to be in Canada and work a job here because that has certain limits, or I can't say I want to build a house here. And somehow it's very beautiful, but also very complicated to maybe the average experience that is very defined. You work a job, you get a house, you get married, there's certain steps and you're not doing that. So it's nice to be able to talk to people who are also not doing that because it grounds the fact that there is another reality, that there is another way to do it, that it is possible, that people are doing it. And it doesn't sort of make you feel so, on your own woo woo for trusting that there's another way.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. So,
So it's
thank you. This
cool.
conversation has been so refreshing and it's been so amazing catching up with you and hearing what you're doing, what you're working on. For anyone who is listening, how can they connect with you and be a part of your creative process?
Yeah, so I think I have two platforms at the moment. Substack, which is where I'm sharing my writing, and my personal Instagram, which is just my name. But I would say that the project that I'm working on it's called Lektura, and this is a magazine where we're going to share, my partner and I are sharing a lot of our philosophy about beauty, truth, goodness, basically how we see the ideal in life coming to life. And then Lectura Co, which is kind of how we're actually going to live and build our story and showcase that along the way. So there's a philosophical component and then there's an applied component of our lives. And I think that Lektura and my personal Instagram is the best place to connect with me. And of course, my Substack, which is just my name and Lektura as well.
Amazing. Well,
Yes.
I will link all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and open. And like I said, I think there will be a lot of people who are feeling very refreshed by this conversation. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was really something special and something I wanted to do for a long time. And you came to me at the perfect time. So thank you.
you're welcome.